Hi everybody, I'm Amy Bailey from the Funky Fork blog, and you are now listening to the Funky Fork podcast. Today I am joined by Tony Federico. He is awesome, and I'm actually going to have him tell you guys why he's on my podcast in just a minute, because he's really cool, and I'm really excited. Tony is a fellow Northeast Florida resident, a blogger, trainer, and really cool guy. So I felt that he was definitely necessary to have on the podcast. So Tony, tell us a little bit about what you do, and we'll take it from there.
All right. So, yeah, I think you kind of covered the bases. I'm the host of the Paleo Magazine radio podcast. I'm a writer for the magazine as well. So you can find regular columns in every issue, basically, whether it's a business spotlight or an inspiring story. So that's sort of my side job. And then my main bread and butter is I am a personal trainer. So every day I'm seeing, about 10 people and helping them to be fit and live well.
Nice. Cool. I love that you said that you're writing for Paleo Magazine and hosting a podcast is your side job. That sounds so big and exciting and glamorous. So,
I don't know if a side job. It's sort of, I don't think side job really does it justice because I spend almost as much time with the writing and the podcasting. I have a cookbook coming out in just 2 weeks, so that was a huge project. So I really have sort of a dual life, if you will. Sometimes it kind of feels like being a paleo superhero. It's like you go through, your quote unquote ordinary life, and then you get to come home and create things that reach thousands and thousands of people. And that's really kind of a neat experience, especially when you get feedback back from people who actually are feeling what you're putting out there. Yeah. So that's kind of the best part for me is when somebody comes back. It's like, oh, I liked that article you wrote, or this podcast really spoke to me in some way. And that always blows my mind because and you're probably experiencing this as well. It's kind of a private thing to sit on your computer and type something up or do a blog post. Even doing a podcast right now, it's just, it looks like just you and I are talking, but then all these people are going to be able to tune in and check it out. And it's just like a really kind of interesting, cool experience that's, kind of new. It's not paleo, quote unquote, but it's it's fulfilling.
Totally. Yeah. I actually totally relate to everything you just said. I write for the local newspaper, the St. Augustine Record.
Yep, I saw that.
Yeah, and it's great, and I love it. And it's like you said, it takes up quite a bit of time, but it is very rewarding in the sense that, I send in what I write every week, and people who I don't even know, and they see me, which is so humbling, and they say things like, wow, I loved what you recommended doing with cauliflower in your column last week. And it's kind of crazy still.
I know.
Like you said, like you're like, oh, thanks. Like that's kind of cool.
That's awesome.
You got something out of it. So I totally know what you're talking about. I think that's awesome. So I always kind of do like a fun icebreaker with folks that come on.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do this with you today. I wanted you to tell us 3 things that people would be really shocked or surprised to know about you.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, I think that one thing is first of all, the big thing is I was an absolutely unathletic kid. I was terrible at sports. I think a lot of people see me as a personal trainer. They see me exercising, and at this point in my life, I think I'm pretty competent physically as far as being able to pick up and play, really any sport or whatever. Mm-hmm. But that's only because I was so terrible for so long. And as a kid, I grew up in Miami. I grew up in South Florida. There's no sport that my parents didn't enroll me in, and there's no sport that I didn't absolutely hate and throw temper tantrums trying to get out of. And I remember specifically one incident where I was holding onto a palm tree. It was South Florida, mind you. I'm hanging onto a palm tree, and my dad's pulling on my legs because I didn't want to go to football practice. So that's one thing people might not know. I think that's the first time I've shared that in a podcast, so that's a first. So another thing is, I guess along with that, I'm kind of a geek. I'm into Japanese manga. I'm a Naruto fan. I don't know if that means anything to you, but
You just
uh,
spoke Japanese to me.
it's just one of those things where for whatever reason I connect with the storylines. It's super geeky, but I always loved superheroes and things like that growing up. So I haven't lost my that inner child that likes superpowers and ninjas and things along those lines. And I try to actually implement that in a sort of productive and maybe mature way by looking at some of these quote unquote superpowers and thinking, okay, what are like cool, like realistic superpowers? So, for example, when I was about to turn 30, I'm 31 now, so this is a couple of years ago, I thought to myself, all right, I've always been deathly afraid of doing a backflip. When I was a kid, kind of going back to the whole unathletic thing, I never attempted a backflip on a trampoline. Other kids just do flips. When they're young, they're fearless. I had a lot of fear, so I wasn't one to just throw myself into space and spin around. So years and years of being deathly afraid of the idea of spinning backwards, didn't really ever feel comfortable doing a backflip, even into a pool. But I finally was like, you know what? This is something I'm just going to face. I'm gonna tackle it in a way that's going to be useful to me beyond just the physical component. It's going to be an exercise in achieving a goal that seems unattainable. And so I searched around, and after trying multiple times, going to gymnastics facilities and saying, hey, do you have a coach? Is there someone that can teach me how to do a backflip? Watching all these YouTube videos, this whole process of thinking that something was going to work and then it didn't, and going to a place and it wasn't what I thought it would be. Ultimately, bottom line, I found a gymnastics facility that offered adult classes. I started going on a regular basis 2 days a week. And within 3 months and about a month before my 30th birthday, I did a full-on backflip, standing on the ground, jumped up, flipped around there, landed on my feet. So that's sort of an application of my love of superpowers and kind of geeky, cartoon superhero type stuff.
That's
So
cool.
that's number two. I hope you knew what you're getting yourself into. You asked for three things. I'm giving you three things.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing, and it's funny because somebody actually, I was talking with Stephanie Ruper and Stacy Toth and um, Sarah Ballantyne at Paleo FX, and they're doing sort of like an on-site podcast at the house that Stacy had rented just up the street from the Palmer Center, which is Paleo FX, the event center. And you were there, so you know all about that.
Yeah.
So we're in their house, and they're kind of like, all right, we're going to do a podcast. And so it was me and Stacy and Sarah and Russ Crandall's there and Stacy's husband, and they're all kind of gathered around. They're sharing stories, and they're all talking about things that like nobody has really talked about before. Kind of like this, like what are those things that nobody really knows about? And Russ tells this story about getting held hostage when he was in the Navy, and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And then Stephanie and Sarah, they start talking about some of the work that they had done in their previous academic kind of focused lives. And apparently Stephanie wrote some crazy paper on astrophysics or something that I don't even,
What?
a field of science that I don't even know what that's. It's like I didn't know that thing existed, and you were like doing some amazing work in that. And then Sarah like had written a paper that had to do with using radiation to attack prostate cancer that's probably saved all these people's lives. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And then and finally it kind of comes around. Oh, and then Stacy Toth like had the #1 score in some test like in the state for something or other. So like she's like ridiculously smart in addition to like everything else. And so it's just they kind of all went through and had these amazing stories. And they're like, all right, Tony, name something that we don't know about you. And I completely like brain farted, had nothing. I'm like, I don't know what to say. I think I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. Like I just had no idea. And then of course, as these things happen, like 2 hours later, I'm like, oh, one thing that I never talked to anybody about, and it's super relevant to paleo and health and everything. And there's probably plenty of people that would love to know about this because it's something that they have to deal with also, is I don't have a thyroid gland.
Oh, really?
Right? Exactly. So, it's a video podcast. I don't know if you can kind of see, but like right here
Uh-huh.
is actually the scar They did a good job. It's actually an incision that was made on the line. You know how you sort of have like lines on your neck
Yeah.
anyway, like a little crease or whatever. So they did it right there, so it kind of blends in. But basically, the story is when I was 15 years old, it was the summer of eighth grade, so going into freshman year of high school. I went in for a routine physical. Doctor kind of feels around on my neck and he goes, "Oh, there's a thickness there." And I'm like, "Okay, what does that mean?" And several rounds of testing and some imaging and biopsies and whatnot later, they found out that I had a cyst of some sort on my thyroid gland.
Mm.
And at first they're like, "Oh, it might be benign, blah, blah, blah." They did some tests. They're like, "We're not really sure what this is. We're going to operate." And so the plan was to take half of my thyroid out, leaving me with half a gland that is sufficient to produce thyroid hormone to the amount that you
Right.
need. It kind of, whatever's left picks up the slack and maybe even grows back or whatever. So this is a few weeks before freshman year of high school started, and I go in and I'm put under. It's a pretty serious operation. They,
Hmm.
full anesthesia, everything. And 5 hours later, I wake up, can't lift my head up because they cut the muscles in your neck to do this surgery.
Right.
And I'm informed at this point, because I had no say in any of this, that they decided to just take my entire thyroid gland out because they weren't sure. And just to be safe, they're like, well, it could have been cancer. So let's just kind of, better safe than sorry, take the whole thing out. I'm like, oh, what? And anyway, that's when they handed me my bottle of Synthroid, and I began what has now been 15 plus years of being absolutely dependent on thyroid hormone, which, as you probably know, and many other paleo people know, and people just in general know, is one of the master hormones that signals multiple aspects of your metabolism. It's
Hmm.
intimately tied to your adrenal system, the pituitary gland. It's sort of this axis of hormonal signals that govern metabolism. But anyway, it's been this really crazy experience in this part of my life that, for whatever reason, I don't really ever talk about. So I think that I'm letting it be known here that I have what's called surgically acquired hypothyroidism, which basically means they cut out my thyroid and now I have zero natural thyroid production. I'm completely dependent on medication, and because of that, I've had to deal with thyroid hormone levels being completely out of whack, adrenal fatigue, having to go through various types of treatment, such as going from Synthroid, which is a synthetic version of T4, to what I'm
Hmm.
now taking, which is Armour Thyroid. It's actually a desiccated pig thyroid gland, which seems to be working much better. I kind of felt like that was more paleo and a little bit more natural. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go with the pork product. It's like it's closer to bacon than this
Yeah.
synthetic. It's basically thyroid bacon. That's what it is.
That's what I was
And
thinking.
right, exactly. I know exactly. So yeah, that's my third thing that nobody really ever, nobody knows. I don't have a thyroid gland, so if you have thyroid issues, I feel you, and I do think that following a paleo diet, which is obviously solid whole food nutrition, and being physically active and really being attentive to your body and your need for sleep and all those things, those have allowed me to maintain my health despite having crazy up and down swings in my thyroid levels, which in many cases it really should have led me to being very overweight and completely depleted in terms of my adrenals, which at various times I've had to deal with that. But so yeah, that's my third thing. So boom,
Wow.
the ice hopefully has been broken.
Yeah, wow. That leads to so many questions that pop up in my head. Wow. Maybe we'll talk later
Right.
on a little bit more about that. So I love all that. That was really cool. Thank you for sharing that. I know that's
Open book, right?
yeah, I mean, I know that's pretty personal, but like you said, it's kind of applicable to the whole health and
Yeah.
wellness paleo thing. Um, so I kind of wanted to start off with, I talk a lot about being paleo on my blog. However, as I now look back over the past little over a year that I've been blogging, I did notice that I've never fully explained paleo. And it's probably,
Interesting.
yeah. And I've linked to like, oh, check out Mark Sisson's website or,
Hmm.
some of the big paleo names. But I actually get questions all the time in my day-to-day training life because I talk a lot about paleo or just basically reducing gluten in your diet
Right.
as well as just eating whole foods. And so what I'd really love for you to do, maybe you can just talk about the basics of paleo.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And it's funny because I think when you get into something like this, you obviously read the, if there is a curriculum, so to speak, it's Rob Wolf's book, it's Mark Sisson's book, it's Lauren
Right.
Cordain's book, it's maybe some Gary Taubes, it's maybe it's some Nora Jedgaudas. You kind of go through the whole list, maybe Art Devanian, all these
Yeah.
kind of, those original paleo books,
Yeah.
over the past 10 years, everything that's kind of been produced, because I know that if you're like me, when you first got into this, you searched out everything you could find. You're like, oh my God, I need to know everything.
Yes.
So you just consume all these books. And what that does is it creates a base of knowledge that I think becomes an assumption. You're like,
Right.
okay, these are just sort of facts now. And this is what we're operating from. We're operating with this basic set of knowledge that gluten is something you want to avoid, and grains are not these nutritious superfoods. They're full of anti-nutrients and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny because then you go out and create a blog and you bring that assumption with you,
Right.
but there's all these people coming to interact with your material that maybe have none of that background, and maybe you're the first thing that they're coming across
Mm-hmm.
that's paleo related. And so yeah, I 100% get it. We actually did something a couple months ago is when I recorded it, but it actually is out now. If you go to paleomagonline.com/radio and look up the Paleo Magazine radio podcast, we did a paleo boot camp. So it was
Oh,
4 episodes in a row and just kind of addressing, paleo basics, and then kind of taking it to a couple different levels just to give people that refresher of here's the basics, here's
yeah.
the stuff you need to know. So I would be honored to do that in a way for you here on your podcast, for the Funky Fork. So the basics. I don't know if you saw the picture that FitBomb put out a few years ago after the My Plate came out. So the government put out
Yes.
My Plate, and they're like, have some low-fat dairy and have this and that,
Right.
and have a quarter of your plate be whole grains. Well, he created an image of the paleo My Plate,
Mm-hmm.
and one half says animals and the other half says plants.
Yes.
So if you really get down to it, I think that is in essence what the paleo diet is. So you eat animals and plants. And I think a step beyond that is you eat foods that are identifiable by sight. So for example, things that don't have an ingredients label. They don't require an ingredients label. An organic apple, and I do prefer organic produce, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
think it's mandatory, but I prefer it. An organic apple, for example, doesn't need an ingredients label. A piece of grass-fed beef doesn't need an ingredients label. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So if you eat food that is actually food that doesn't have 15, 20, 30, 50 different ingredients, in my mind, that's paleo. So simply starting by eliminating anything that is, coming in a box or coming in a, freezer package or whatever. So you're getting basically animals and plants. Um, then again, another level is people like to have some sort of concrete thing they can kind of wrap their mind around. I think that's where meal plans come into place. So for example, you're thinking, okay, animals and plants, that's great. What does that actually mean for me in practical terms for my day-to-day life? So you wake up in the morning, normally you eat a bowl of cereal with skim milk in it, and maybe that's it. Or maybe a cup of coffee and a bagel, or a low-fat yogurt,
Mm-hmm.
or you don't eat anything for breakfast. An easy swap right away is a couple hard-boiled eggs. Or if you have time to make breakfast, bacon and eggs. Boom.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an easy thing. Or if you don't like bacon, maybe a couple eggs and avocado. Or if you don't like eggs, maybe a piece of leftover meat from dinner. So kind of removing this breakfast needs to be X, Y, and Z, and turning it into breakfast is a meal. I can eat whatever I want for breakfast, and just sort of opening yourself up to, I'm going to get a piece of real protein, piece of beef, chicken, whatever, an egg, and I'm going to get some healthy fats in there, maybe some nuts, maybe some avocado. And if you want some micronutrient dense foods, maybe saute up some kale
Yeah.
or make a green smoothie. Super easy, coconut milk. You could do an egg protein powder if you want to keep it strictly paleo and avoid dairy products, i.e., whey protein.
Mm-hmm.
Throw in some spinach, boom. So that'd be a great breakfast option or set of options. Lunch comes around, some sort of salad, some sort of meat. You can get that anywhere. You go to Chipotle, burrito bowl, hold the rice, extra meat. Boom, that's easy. You go to a Mexican restaurant or a Spanish restaurant, ceviche, boom, that's an easy option. You go to a steakhouse, sweet potato, steak, side of broccoli, boom. So, you just kind of take this basic template, animals, plants, things that I can identify by sight, things that don't have ingredient labels, and then you just keep applying that meal after meal until you have your three squares. Most people cook dinner at home, so it simply means having some of these ingredients on hand and perhaps getting a couple basic recipes under your belt. I think a great option for dinner is to get a crock pot if you don't already have
Mm-hmm.
one and throw a pork butt into the crock pot. Let it cook all day. You come home, roast a head of cauliflower or roast some vegetables. Maybe you're sick of salads because you already had one at lunch. So zucchini, squash, peppers, sensitive to nightshades like tomatoes and things like that, of
Mm-hmm.
course. Um, maybe saute up some greens, and then you have something ready in the crock pot. A pork butt works. A chuck roast if you're doing beef. An entire chicken works.
Mm-hmm.
So crock pot super versatile, and it makes that paleo dinner a really easy thing. So hopefully, if someone's listening to that, that kind of gives them a basic way to think about what the paleo diet is. It's animals and plants. When you go to the grocery store, what do you buy? Things without ingredient labels. What do you actually eat? Bacon and eggs, a salad with a piece of chicken and maybe some avocado, and then a crock pot pork butt with roasted cauliflower for dinner. Boom.
Yeah, I love that you gave all those options. Mostly because I think the number one thing I hear when I talk to clients or friends or family about paleo is they're like, well, what the heck do I eat? Like, it sounds like there's nothing to eat. And
Right.
I actually thought that too
Right.
when we first started, when my husband and I first started toying with the idea of going paleo, which by the way, I hate kind of labeling it
Yeah.
because it's just so fad right now. I almost feel like
It is what it is, though. We're kind of stuck with it, so might as well just make it your own.
yeah, totally agree. But anyway, so when we were toying with the idea of going paleo, I loved waffles in the morning, sandwiches, eat bread with dinner. That was just a staple in every meal that we ate. And so I was that one that was like, well, gosh, what the heck do we have left to eat? And I've actually found totally the opposite. I mean, the options are endless, and I just love experimenting, especially like you mentioned, the crock pot. I mean, gosh, it doesn't get much easier than that. And you come home from work and there's this amazing, nutritious meal, your house smells good, and you literally take it out and put it on a plate and eat it. It's great. And I'm
Yeah.
glad you mentioned that. So
Yeah, it's super easy.
I also, and I know this could open a whole host of discussions, but I also want to talk about just very briefly the health benefits of eating paleo or eating a whole foods type diet. The obvious is you're getting rid of all the added junk that's in food when you're eating vegetables
Right.
and plants or plants and animals. But can you maybe talk just a little bit deeper? And again, I know that it could be endless, but just
Right. Well, I think the big benefit that you're getting right away, sort of like the low-hanging fruit, if you will, is you're getting a reduction in the sugar content
mhm,
of the diet. The average American consumes, I believe now it's 12 tablespoons or maybe even more per day of added sugars. So that's
yeah,
not sugar that's intrinsic to the food. So for example, a piece of fruit has, maybe a tablespoon of sugar in it. That's not what we're talking about. This is sugar above and beyond what's actually in your food, mostly in the form of soft drinks, soda, etc., candy. So right off the bat, you're eliminating this huge load of sugar. And one thing that we know from looking at native peoples. So it could be Native Americans, it could be South American indigenous populations, it could be really any population you look at. As they were introduced to Western foods, they began to manifest diabetes, heart disease, obesity, the so-called diseases of civilization.
Yeah.
And uh, one of the prime offenders, in addition to us introducing alcohol to these populations, or things like whiskey, more like hard liquor versus the fermented drinks that they probably had as part of their traditional culture, was white sugar. Of course, white flour was also introduced, but we're just kind of starting with that. So white sugar, you're cutting that out of your diet when you go paleo. What does that actually do? Well, elevated blood sugar levels mean elevated insulin levels. Over time, you become insulin resistant. It's just like having a drug in your system and you build a tolerance to it. So insulin resistance means that blood sugar can't go anywhere. It floats around. It begins interacting with proteins in your body in a process called glycation. What does that ultimately mean? It means that you age more rapidly. It means that you're more prone to developing diabetes. It means that you're more prone to developing Alzheimer's disease. So right off the bat, you go paleo, you're reducing your risk of two huge conditions that are devastating: diabetes, Alzheimer's, metabolic diseases, PCOS in women, polycystic ovarian syndrome. That's another one. So that's a big deal. Certainly part of that, and this is something that can be tied to not just sugar, but other processed foods that you're eliminating, is a decrease in caloric density and an increase in nutrient density. A lot of times people say you don't have to count calories when you take on a paleo style diet. It's not that calories automatically or magically don't count anymore, because they certainly do. And if you overconsume calories, you're going to gain weight. It doesn't matter if they're paleo calories or not. But the fact of the matter is, when you're eating a paleo diet, the volume is so much higher because they are water-rich foods, fruits and vegetables, whole meats. They're unrefined foods, much more water content, much more nutrient content, much more volume. You feel more satiated with less calories. Your body's more nourished, so the food cravings start to go away. You ultimately end up cutting calories without suffering the hunger pangs and cravings and mental anguish of having to, by a force of will, restrict calories. So it's not like you stare at this package of cookies and you think to yourself, oh, I'm just going to have one, and you eat one. You're like, oh, I could totally eat the entire package. You eat a paleo meal. Most people aren't like, oh man, I had that one steak and now I'm going to eat the whole package of steaks. Or I ate that one egg and now I can't stop myself from eating the whole dozen eggs.
Right.
I start eating eggs and pretty soon the whole carton's gone. I don't know what happened. I woke up the next day and the carton was empty.
Can't keep
That
eggs
never
around
happens.
me.
Can't keep, you know how I get. So that's the thing too. So you're cutting calories, but you're not making yourself crazy about having to do that just by forcing yourself to stay away from food, which we know doesn't work. Studies of willpower show that it wears out over time. You only have a limited amount over the course of the day. So you're driving around in traffic, people are cutting you off, you're having to keep yourself civilized, you're having to prevent yourself from punching people in the face when they are mean to you at work. So you have to keep this veneer of civilization together, and you get home, you're tired, and boom, you run for the pantry and it's on. So by eliminating this need to constantly fight with ourselves over, I can't eat as much as I want, I can't eat this or that or whatever, that's a huge mental burden that's released. And because now you actually have functionally reduced your calorie intake, you're going to have a much more easy time maintaining your weight. You might lose weight. If you're undernourished, you might gain some lean muscle mass. So, for example, if somebody was following a vegan or vegetarian diet, not slamming that, I know plenty of people that are following vegan and vegetarian diets that are doing it in a very responsible way, I guess you could say. But the bottom line is it's probably pretty low in protein, probably pretty low in vitamin B12, probably pretty low in certain nutrients that we as animals who eat other animals kind of by necessity, you might need. So you might gain weight. You might gain some lean muscle mass by going paleo. You have more protein, you have more animal derived nutrients to really kind of fire on all cylinders. So that's another huge benefit. You're reducing metabolic disease because you're cutting out the refined sugar and refined carbohydrates. You're getting better weight control because you're eating more satisfying foods and you're eliminating the addictive, nutrient poor, calorie dense foods. And then, I don't know, I would say that a third huge benefit is that, like you kind of mentioned, you start to see all the other options that are out there because really, rather than being a limited diet, which is one of the main criticisms that you see out in the popular media, paleo is too restrictive, it's too difficult to follow. Actually, eating the same refined wheat cereal every morning for breakfast, eating the same corn syrup sweetened snacks every single day, eating the same bland factory processed meat product or whatever every single day. That is the very definition of banality, of boring, of lacking variety. That is industrial food that really only uses a handful of ingredients and then they add artificial colors and flavors to create the illusion of variety. So one of the benefits I think of paleo is rediscovering the amazingness of real food, which is how great a fresh piece of fruit that's been grown in a proper way can taste. So if you take like a freshly picked strawberry from like an organic farm, it is amazingly different and actually tastes like a strawberry. I remember when I was going to school in Gainesville, they had an organic blueberry farm out. I don't know if you know the Gainesville area very well, but out in Newberry, so it's a little bit west outside of Gainesville. And there's this guy, Farmer Brad. Every year in July, right around this time of year, he opens up his organic blueberry farm. I remember the first time going there, going around picking these blueberries. I'm like, oh my God, this actually tastes like blueberry. Like the stereotypical blueberryness was 100% there. It wasn't just this watery mush ball that you get at the grocery store. I'm like, oh, so real food actually tastes really good. Brussels sprouts are amazing. How did I never know that? Well, I was always eating really poorly prepared ones and not really good quality ones. And I certainly wasn't putting bacon in them, which is kind of the key to good Brussels sprouts, and maybe a little balsamic vinegar. But anyway, I think that that's the other benefit of paleo is that you actually open culinary doors. You open up doors of experience. You open up an awareness of food production, which often facilitates or fosters an interest in maybe producing some of your own food, or at least getting to know the people that produce your food. So you truly deepen your relationship with this primary act that we all engage in every day. And so rather than going around and living unconsciously and having foods handed to us through a drive-through window and just putting it down our throat while we're doing 15 different things, driving, listening to something, talking on the phone, let's have a conscious awareness of where this food comes from, what's in it, and then prepare it ourselves to some degree or another and eat it with that present just actually being there for the experience. And that is just so many levels of benefit, not just nutritionally or physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually as well. So it really is just a completely a different sort of way to live than this unconscious consumption. So those are my three main benefits of the paleo diet.
Yeah.
Which again, I think you ask these questions. I don't know if you know what you're getting yourself into.
No, I love it.
Okay.
I really, really wholeheartedly support what you just said about the conscious eating. Basically, I teach a nutrition course at the gym that I work at every Wednesday night, and that's something I push big time because just like you said, when you're focused and you put work into your food and you're conscious of the source of where your food came from and you're cooking it with quality ingredients and you care about what you're putting in your body. It's like you said, when you sit down and you enjoy this meal and you're like, wow, this tastes really good, and I'm taking a few minutes out of my day to nourish myself. I mean, I think that's really powerful. Right. And I think until someone kind of gets that, almost feels that, they don't fully understand. But I love that you said that, because that's something I'm really passionate about people doing. I actually challenged my class
Yeah.
to eat all of their meals over a span of 20 minutes each day. And everyone came back to me saying that was super
Oh, wow.
hard, because they're just, you're off in the car in the morning, you're drinking your coffee, and like you said, eating your bagel or your granola bar in traffic. You're thinking about to-do lists and getting back to your voicemail and all the million things we have on our mind. But what does it look like if you just take that few minutes in your day to just be present? And yeah, you're eating breakfast, but it's good, and you're good to your body, and you're good to your mind. And so anyway, I just love that you added that. So thank you. That was
Yeah.
that
Well,
was
my pleasure. It's super powerful, and I feel like it might not be part of sort of the paleo sphere yet, but I feel like that's sort of the next level when we kind of go beyond what's simply on our plate to how, okay, so a lot of the focus is what's on your plate, right?
mm-hmm.
Well, how are you showing up? So
Yeah.
regardless of what's on your plate, how are you approaching the plate? And then beyond that, who are you surrounded with? Are you surrounded by family and friends? Are you engaging in conversation? Are you engaging in quality relationships with the people around you? I mean, I feel like the paleo diet starts with, okay, let's be super conscious about what we're putting into our mouth. But then I feel like there's this ripple effect that if you are open to it, can really extend out to all aspects of your life. And I think that that's really what the paleo lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
can represent, which is a holistic way of viewing all aspects of not just kind of these physical functions like digestion and nutrition and sleep or stress, but relationships, with community, and
Mm-hmm.
there's so much more that can be kind of gleaned from it. And I think having that present, being willing to be present, and it is a difficult thing, and
Yeah.
there's so many distractions around us. And you know let's use that caveman analogy. Would a caveman have had their smartphone going and watching something on Netflix and be eating at the same time? No, they would have
Yeah.
been gathered around the fire with close kin, with family, multiple generations of family, no
Mm-hmm.
less. An animal that they either killed or a family member killed, that they had to all prepare and kind of gather around, and something that had importance and weight to it. Food was much more scarce, relatively scarce. So there's an appreciation, a sense of gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can aspire to do the same thing when we find ourselves fortunate enough to have a full plate of food in front of us. Are we exercising gratitude for that food, for the people that we're able to share it with, for the ability to enjoy it, for what it does for our body? I think that there's just all these kind of levels that we can access, and it really can be a transformative experience, if you're willing uh, to do the work, I guess, of getting outside of your normal habits and routines. And it's not easy, but it's certainly worth it to invest that time and energy in yourself, because we're constantly making energetic withdrawals. We're constantly
Yeah.
making nutrition withdrawals. So we eat foods that actually pull nutrients from our body. And so we become more and more depleted. We do things that kind of pull like life force out of us.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a way to reverse that trend and actually infuse our diet and our life itself with just really kind of positive energy. Instead of watching TV, go for a walk or something out for dinner. Get outside in nature. I mean, to me, that's paleo. To me, that's such a huge part of it. I think it's great that you're having that conversation with people at your gym, and I think the more people in the paleo community are kind of talking about that and focusing on that, I think the more people we're ultimately going to engage and uh, I don't want to say that we're going to transform them, but maybe we inspire them to transform themselves, because that's ultimately the most you can ever do.
Yes.
You can't change somebody. They can maybe see what you're doing. They can maybe feel what you're doing, and find the strength within themselves to challenge their own self-limiting beliefs and preconceived notions and obstacles and roadblocks, that are keeping them from living a really full, engaged life, whatever that means for that individual.
Yeah, it's kind of why I wish stick with me on this tie-in. I wish I could just bring everyone I know to Paleo FX because, you're
Mm.
around all these really vivacious, healthy, happy people who are working very hard to spread their message, but they're doing so in a very happy, loving, like caring way. They
Yeah.
want that message out there because they care and they want people to feel great and be healthy and like I said, climb trees and run around and
Right.
you know, chest bump each other because it's fun and silly. So
Did you do one of Daryl Edwards's primal play around
I
workshops?
didn't, and I so
What?
regret it. I know. Did you?
I have done several. This was the first year that I actually didn't do one of his, but I've been able to do things with Daryl for the previous two Paleo FXs at AHS a couple times, and he always has such a cool way of bringing play into our sort of adult lives, and I think
Yeah.
a big part of that is really just not giving people a chance to be hung up on physical space. He's like, all right, gather around, put your arms around. I'm probably doing
Uh-huh.
more of an Australian accent. He's British. Yeah, gather around. All right, come on. He like gets
Mateys.
everyone. Put another strip on the bobby. No, I'm sorry, Daryl, if you're listening to this. You're not Australian. I have a terrible British accent. That's all me. But yeah, he gets people kind of like hugging each other and they're like putting their arms up and they're lifting each
Uh-huh.
other up. And he's like, all right, piggyback rides, let's go. You get somebody to jump up on your back. You're like, hold up, wait, we're not supposed to have physical contact. Oh, all right, too late. You're already doing, you're
Yeah.
laughing, you're having fun, high fiving people, whatever. So yeah, just that aspect of play and um, community. I feel like we really do have a hunger and a craving for it, and we don't even know that that's something that we're
Yep.
in need of until you go to something like Paleo Effects and you taste it, and you're like, ooh, that's really good. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to take Paleo Effects back to Florida, back to Jacksonville. I feel like, going to those events is great, but it makes me feel super sad to think that I can only experience something like that a handful of times a year. Although they are offering more events,
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be one in Denver and et cetera, et cetera. So there's more opportunities. But I feel like that can be the seed that we then take back and plant in our own backyard, if you will. And, whether it's hosting, nutrition classes at your local gym and getting people kind of rallied around this idea or whatever, just kind of getting your circle of family and friends involved. And maybe it's not eating paleo per se, but it's having this kind of conversation about food and where things come from and, having a conversation, rather
Yeah.
than sort of, kind of interacting at this kind of superficial level of, hey, how you doing? I'm good. All right, moving on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back to the phone, back to thumb exercises.
Yeah. Back to Instagram.
Right.
Yeah.
Where's my phone? I want it now.
Yeah. Take a picture.
I have it. Selfie, boom.
Um, so I wanted to kind of transition a tiny bit. We talked a little bit about playing and having fun in that kind of way of movement. And I know you're a fellow trainer. I noticed
Right.
you're a fellow ACSM trainer, American College of
Ah,
Sports Medicine certified trainer.
yes.
That's kind of fun. But
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about movement. And we don't have a ton of time
Right.
left, but I just wanted to kind of get your, like, what's your belief? Like, do you train people to do bicep curls or are you teaching them, how to jump over things and climb things?
Yeah. So this might seem heretical, but I don't have people outside running around doing like MoveNet, parkour type stuff, even though that's sort of like, if people think, oh, what's paleo fitness? What's paleo exercise? We were just talking about Daryl Edwards's uh,
Hmm.
primality workshops. That's what they're doing. They're climbing on railings and they're, getting dirty. For whatever reason, I don't think a lot of people are ready for that
Yeah.
in their gym experience. If I took my clients and were like, you know what? We're gonna go outside and I'm gonna have you lay down on the ground and then jump up real quick and then lay back down on the ground and then we're gonna come back in here and you're gonna be covered in grass and dirt. I think that here's the difference. You go to a place like, you go to something like PaleoFX, you're open to having that sort of experience,
Right.
presumably on some sort of level.
Yes.
And if somebody's open to an experience, that's the time to offer it. So for instance, if somebody says, "Hey, I'm interested in the paleo diet," and this is like, I'm just kind of pretending that this is a client of mine. "Hey, I'm interested in the paleo diet. Tell me more." Boom. I'm going to give them, just some basic information. They go, "Oh, that's interesting. What about this?" "Okay, I'll go down that road." "Oh, what about this?" "I'll go down that road." And as soon as they're done asking, I'm going to stop giving, because I feel like that's an important part of respecting someone else's place, where they are in their particular journey and on their particular path. Same thing with exercise. I take people who are used to working in a very kind of standard gym environment, standard gym set of experiences. What I try to do is infuse best practices into that, safe, effective movement for their goals. I want them to have an exercise session that's interesting, that's engaging. I use primal movements, squats, lunges, pushing, pulling. So I have that in there, but I'm also going to give them some of the things that they want. So if they're like, "Hey, Tony, I want to work on some biceps and some triceps," I'm going to throw that in there as well. My goal is to give them a functional body. And hopefully, by being flexible, having good range of motion, if they do want to go out and play with their kids, or if they find themselves in a situation where, maybe it's a less kind of structured movement, they're going to be able to do that without blowing out their back, because now they have some good core stability, which isn't just doing a bunch of crunches. It's actually being able to stabilize your spine. They're going to be able to pick things up because they have a good squat and deadlift pattern. So maybe however many years from now, there's going to be more desire for that, and I'm happy to meet that. I do go to these adult gymnastics classes. I go to CrossFit gyms and things of that nature, and I see more interest in it from those populations. But in the standard gym environment where I'm currently working, I'm just doing my best to give people really just the basics. It's like basic nutrition. It's like the bacon and eggs of exercise. It's nothing fancy, but it's nutritious, it's wholesome. It's giving their body what they need in a way that's palatable. So that's kind of my piece on movement.
Yeah, and I totally second exactly what you said. It's interesting too. I found that over time, a lot of my clients that have been with me 6, 7, 8 months or more, once they become more functional in their movement, I have one woman who's I'm thinking of in particular. She was so proud of herself. She like moved furniture on her own, and she lives alone, and she has grown sons, and she's like, I didn't even have to ask them to help me. So she gets really excited, and she says, "Teach me something new. Like, I want to do something outside the box." And it's so fun to see someone get excited about that. And like you said, maybe it is laying in the grass and jumping up and down and, oh, hang from this tree and do a pull up from a tree branch. Like, she would be all over that now. If I had said that 8 months ago, like you said, she would have been like, "You want me to hang from a tree?
I'm gonna go.
I'm gonna go do bicep curls in the gym." So I totally agree, and
You're crazy.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, that's spot on. I think I'm totally with you. So let's see, we're running out of time, but among all the things we talked about today, I'm really excited to hear a little bit about your cookbook that you have coming out. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Absolutely. I am terrible at promoting myself. I just feel, I don't know, like a certain amount of, it's like, I don't want to I don't want to brag or whatever, and maybe just kind of feeling like, I don't know, whatever. It's impolite to talk too much about yourself. But I got one of the
Really?
got a copy, and I don't know, like it's got some really cool illustrations in there. It's got cool stuff about how to find out where your meat comes from. We got some cute little pigs and cows in there. We have organ meats. It's a grilled chicken liver yakitori. So there's, some ethnic recipes as well. Boom, plenty of meat. Got some solid bison ribs. Of
Ooh,
course, there's like regular quote unquote foods in there as well. Some whole fish. So there's seafood, there's beef, there's pork. Um, got a whole snapper recipe. So, it's certainly ingredients that we're able to find locally. It's some stuff that we had to source outside of it. All the pictures in the book, by the way, the foods pictured came from U.S. Wellness Meats, from Tendergrass Farms,
great.
from Broken Arrow Ranch. So everything that you actually see in the book, it's all 100% grass fed, grass finished, wild caught, sustainable,
Great.
sourced meat, which was interesting to kind of go out and say, okay, you really can find all of these things out there. I really would have loved to have found more of this locally. We're still kind of building up that local infrastructure.
Hmm.
It wasn't until after the book was finished that I found Black Hog Farm, which is in Palatka, which is kind of like
Yeah.
between you and me,
Yeah.
between Jacksonville and St. Augustine. And I'm planning a trip out there. I don't know. Maybe if you're interested, we can go visit Black Hog Farm. It's a local, sustainable farm operation, and they have some really cute pigs. So that might be some good fodder for a blog post or whatever.
Yeah.
But that was one of the cool experiences of doing the book. It's all about grilling. It's meat. It's fire. It's a primal way of cooking food. It's probably one of the first ways that we experienced cooked foods. It's one of the sort of innate human characteristics is that we do cook food, that we gather around a fire. Unlike other animals, we don't run from fire. We don't flee from it. We're actually interested in it, which could mean that there is some evolutionary selection that drove us. Those who were interested in fire were the ones that survived because they were maybe the ones that were cooking and, had more nutritious food. So I just feel like it makes a lot of sense to talk about grilling and to have a paleo book that's the focus. It just really is a logical combination, and and amazingly, nobody else had written a book
Yeah.
about paleo grilling. And I actually think there's a couple ebooks out now, and I know that there was one that was like called like Tender Grass Fed Meat, which is sort of like how to cook grass fed meats versus conventionally raised meats. Personally, I haven't found a whole lot of difference if you have, some basic awareness of ingredients. Maybe it's done a little bit quicker if you take a grass-fed steak versus a conventionally raised steak because there's a little bit less fat content in certain cuts. But I haven't found there to be a tremendous difference. You just got to pay attention to your ingredients. Maybe use a meat thermometer. But anyway, that's my piece about the book. I think it turned out really great. Like I said, I'm not super comfortable like talking about myself, but a lot of those sort of fears and anxieties that I had went away when I got the copy of it and I'm thumbing through. I'm like, oh, okay, it's actually good. It all worked out.
I'm really cool. I just wrote a book.
I was like, wow, all right. I can talk to people about this and not be like, yeah, I wrote a book. It's okay. It's
Yeah.
pretty cool. So, Amazon.com,
Okay.
can find it there. It's available for pre-order. It's going to be out June 14th. Hopefully it's going to be picked up in stores like Costco and Barnes and Noble. That's the goal. It's being published by the same publisher that did the Paleo Slow Cooker by R.C. Vartanian.
Yeah.
And that book did very well. And then they did another couple books like 500 Paleo Recipes, and those have all done pretty well. So it's like a legit actual book. And hopefully people like it. It's going to be coming out just in time for Father's Day. So great present
Nice.
there. And it is grilling season. So,
That's what I'm saying.
right? And, give me your mailing address and I'll send you one.
Okay, deal. And I was going to tell you, I will link this in the blog post that this podcast is published in. So I will make it super easy
Cool.
for one click. And one last thing, if people want to get in touch with you or follow what you're doing, how can they do that?
Right. So I am all over the place at Tony Fed Fitness. That'll get you my Instagram profile. I really kind of like Instagram. I think it's just kind of a cool social media platform. I like pictures. So I generally post something every day on Instagram. At Tony Fed Fitness on Twitter. I'm still kind of figuring out that. You can find me on Facebook. It's facebook.com/fitness in an evolutionary direction. That was my original blog. I realized only after the fact that a 13 syllable blog is like a super poor idea. So I created a livecaveman.com redirect. So if you want to find my blog, you can go livecaveman.com. I'm probably going to chop it down to Tony Fed in the next couple months. Okay. But I'm kind of working on it. It's all a work in progress.
Yeah.
You know, we're all on a journey.
Yes.
But yeah, people can find me. Email me, Tony@PaleoMagOnline. That's pretty simple. Check out the podcast, paleomagonline.com/radio. And the book's Paleo Grilling, A Modern Caveman's Guide to Cooking with Fire. So search Tony Federico and you'll find all sorts of stuff.
Tony, it has been so awesome talking to you.
Thank you.
Could probably go on all afternoon. So thank you.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll want to come back and we can finish talking about all this great stuff. Again, I am Amy from The Funky Fork. You can find me at thefunkyfork.com. If you do like this podcast, please rate it and subscribe to me. I will see you guys next time. Bye.